Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 304 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where, well, the road may go ever on, but we need to stop a bit and take a look at the maps.
And what a famous map it is. Sometimes you need to know exactly where you've been to know where you're going. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I am Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, and I would like to point out, Alan, this is the first time you have gotten my name correct in the script, so thank you.
Is it really?
It is.
I used to call you the Lord of the Obscure Rings facts guy?
You know, it was different every time, I think, and then if I'm remembering correctly, you just sort of gave up and just said, introduce yourself.
Intro nickname here. Doesn't surprise me.
No, not at all. But as I said already, I am joined by the host of this podcast, the man of the West himself, Mr. Alan Sisto, who still uses the Thomas Guide for this sort of thing.
Well, you know, if they made a Thomas Guide for Middle-earth, I'd have to buy one, but so would you. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's fair.
How could you resist a Thomas Guide to Middle-earth? That would be pretty awesome.
I feel like Google Maps could get me there if cell phones existed in Middle-earth.
Problem is, does GPS exist in Middle-earth? I mean, maybe the cell phones do.
You know what? I'll have to talk to Sauron about that.
Fair enough. Folks, join us as we review the first 5 books of The Lord of the Rings. That's going to be quite a task. And preview book 6 as we begin the Prancing Pony Podcast's final season in The Lord of the Rings.
But certainly not your final season, though.
Oh, no, not even close.
We've got Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, Leaf by Niggle, Adventures of Tom Bombadil.
Yep, the idea is to do a couple of seasons of Extra Legendarium, where we'll cover the appendices and things like Unfinished Tales and History of Middle-earth, you know, more intact stories. Then a couple of seasons of non-Legendarium, and then we'll go back and do the Silmarillion one more time to sort of come full circle and go back to where we started.
You always got to do the Silmarillion twice. And again, that's not for everyone, but like, you should do the Silmarillion twice.
It should be for everyone. That's my opinion, yes.
Well, no matter what you read or how you got here, you are all welcome here in the common room at the Prancing Pony Podcast. We are reading and talking our way through Middle-earth with plenty of speculations and lots of dad jokes along the way.
Dad jokes from me and bad jokes from you, of course.
Oh.
Folks, we love deep dives into the lore. We love discussing our favorite themes and a whole lot more.
But we're going to try and keep this, you know, a little bit light, a little bit fun, a couple of friends chatting at a pub, and we're really glad that you've joined us.
Indeed, and I'm sure you'll be glad you joined as well. Tonight, we're going to go ahead and get right into the discussion. We're going to start with a brief chat about the composition history of Book 6. Don, why don't you start us off?
Absolutely. So I'm going to take you back to Volume 9 of the History of Middle-earth in the book Sauron Defeated. Christopher Tolkien writes, quote, "With this book, my account of the writing of The Lord of the Rings is completed. I regret that I did not manage to keep it even within the compass of 3 fat volumes, but the circumstances were such that it was always difficult to project its structure and foresee its extent, and became more so since, when working on Return of the King, I was largely ignorant of what was to come." He also, if you need a reason, that's a pretty good reason.
If you're Christopher Tolkien and you just simply are plowing through your father's old notes, I think it's fair to say, I didn't know what was coming next.
This is perhaps the equivalent of me trying to dissect the entirety of the Prancing Pony Podcast if you do eventually get to season 25.
Season 25. Good luck with that, sir.
We'll see what happens. Christopher Tolkien also points out that when his father stopped work on The Lord of the Rings back in 1945 and 46, that was when he was working on the Notion Club papers. At the same time, he was creating the Adunaic language and creating a new version of the Numenor legend. So he had his hands full.
He did indeed. And that switch, that transition from The Lord of the Rings to the Notion Club papers, which, you know, that's why it encompassed the new Adunaic language and the new Numenorian legends. That made Christopher's job in assembling this volume of the history of Middle-earth a little complicated, including even coming up with a title. He explains, "My father's suggested title for Book 6 of The Lord of the Rings was The End of the Third Age. But it seemed very unsatisfactory to name this volume, talking about Sauron Defeated, The End of the Third Age and Other Writings, when the other writings, constituting 2/3 of the book, were concerned with matters pertaining to the Second Age and to whatever age we find ourselves in now. Sauron Defeated is my best attempt to find some sort of link between the disparate parts and so to name to the whole."
I cannot imagine the number of hours Christopher Tolkien put into this. Just thinking about it sometimes boggles my mind. And it is thanks to Christopher's work in Sauron Defeated, we can kind of take a look at the chronology of his father, Professor Tolkien's writings in The Return of the King, specifically in Book 6.
Right. So Christopher explains, I take it as certain that my father took up The Lord of the Rings again after the long halt at the end of 1944 in the latter part of 1946. This was when he returned to the abandoned openings of the chapters Minas Tirith and the Muster of Rohan. For the subsequent chronology of writing, there is little evidence beyond the rather obscure statements in his letters. On 30th September 1946, that's letter number 106 to Stanley Unwin, he said that he picked it up again last week and wrote a further chapter, but there is really no knowing what this was, Christopher says. Later, in December, he writes 107 to Stanley Unwin, and Christopher Tolkien quotes that, saying, I still hope shortly to finish my magnum opus, The Lord of the Rings, and let you see it before long or before January. I am on the last chapters. The last chapters, you say?
Yeah. Not exactly, because that was on the 7th of December, 1946.
Right.
But on April 7th, 1948, a full 16 months later, he wrote to Hugh Brogan in letter 114 saying, quote, only the difficulty of writing the last chapters and the shortage of paper have so far prevented its printing. I hope at least to finish it this year, which I'm watching that quote and I'm amazed at how different the world is now, that the idea of a paper shortage was what almost prevented. Think about how different it would have been, had anything changed.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, it wasn't until the very end of October, and he wrote to Brogan again, this is letter 117, that he'd said, quote, succeeded at last in bringing The Lord of the Rings to a successful conclusion.
So December 7th, 1946, he goes, I'm going to be finished with it really soon. I'll let you see it by January. And then here it is over a year and a half later, October of 48, and he finally brings it to a successful conclusion. That is wild.
I feel like there's a very artistic behavior that I don't know if you do this, Alan, but I will constantly
Well, I'm not an artist, so probably not.
You do this podcast, the creative arts. There's always it'll be done then. Yeah, it'll be done then. And then it's never finished. The artist's work is never finished.
Well, even our book. I mean, Sean and I kept working on that book for ages and ages and ages and kept thinking, all right, well, the deadline's by X, so it'll be done by X. And then you're like, oh, well, somehow the existence of the deadline doesn't mean the work actually got done. So we had to extend the deadline and still do the work,
Still got to do the work. Still got to do the work. I'm thinking about what happens if Tolkien publishes it not 16 months later, but 32 months later, or pushes it back, or even if it gets published before then. Like if he says, all right, it's fine, it's good enough, and suddenly we miss something in those last few edits.
Well, what's crazy is he supposedly finishes it in 1948, but we all know the books don't come out for another 7 years.
7 years. It's been 55,
yeah.
Oof.
So Christopher explains some evidence, by the way, that points to the conclusion of these last chapters being written in 1948. He says, the only other evidence that I know of is found in 2 pages on which my father made a list of candidates for an academic post with notes on their previous experience. Against several of the names, he noted both date of birth and present age, from which it is clear that the year was 1948. On the reverse of one of these pages is drafting for the passage in The Land of Shadow, in which Frodo and Sam see the darkness of Mordor being driven back. The second part is overwritten with drafting for the discussion of food and water in the Tower of Cirith Ungol, while the reverse of it carries very rough sketching of the discovery of Frodo by Sam in the tower. Wow.
As grateful as I am to Tolkien for what he gave me personally and the world of fantasy as a whole, that man with a Google Docs folder or some sort of electronic writing device. Can you imagine the subfolders that would just be, all right, well, here's this idea that I had, but also I was thinking about this cat Tevildo and then Beren and Luthien. What if
I... Oh, man. And then, of course, he'd have a folder full of just alliterative verse, a folder full of the cantos and the different, Wow. Yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, if he was able to do all this with literally pen and paper for the vast majority of it, I mean, yes, he eventually did type scripts, but as he said, very slowly because he couldn't afford to get them properly typed up by somebody. Imagine how much more he would have been able to do if he was doing it electronically and efficiently and not having to do it over millions of pieces of scrap paper. Would have made Christopher's job a little easier too.
Yeah, seriously. You say that. I don't think I'd ever use efficient to describe J.R.R. Tolkien at all.
No. And that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I'm not efficient at all.
No.
But thinking about, here's the entire book in prose. And then I rewrote it in iambic pentameter. And then this one takes place entirely from the perspective of Tom Bombadil.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There'd be so much. Unbelievable. Wow.
Oh, goodness.
So 1948 is when it looks like he got near the very end. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And so that evidence that you said, Alan, leads Christopher to conclude that, quote, in December 1946, he was on the last chapter of The Lord of the Rings and hoped to finish it before January. But in 1948, he was drafting the opening chapters of Book 6. The explanation must be, I think, that by the end of 1946, he had completed or largely completed Book 5. And so, in relation to the whole work, he could feel that he was now on the last chapters, and greatly underestimating, as he had so often done before, how much needed to be told before he reached the end. He thought that he could finish it within the month, but 1947 was largely unproductive. And as the letter implies, Book 6 was not written until 1948.
I love that. I love that sideways snark from his son, by the way, greatly underestimating, as he had so often done before, how much needed to be told. Yeah.
There's always more. The thing with Tolkien that I love so much is that there's always more that needs to be told. If the man were a movie director, every movie would be 15 hours long.
Seriously. There would not be an extended edition because he wouldn't release anything that wasn't already an extended edition.
No. Well, I mean, think about the books, the Beren and Luthien book, the Children of Húrin book, the Fall of Gondolin book. Those are all more or less extended editions of various parts of his writings.
They sure are. So even though Book 6 wasn't written until 1948, what's interesting, especially as we look at Sauron Defeated, is that some of the elements were there from far, far earlier. Christopher explains, quote, the conception of the fiery mountain, in which alone the ring could be destroyed and to which the quest will ultimately lead, goes back to the earliest stages in the writing of The Lord of the Rings. It first emerged in Gandalf's conversation with Bingo Bolger Baggins, predecessor of Frodo.
Bingo!
Yeah, good old Bingo. Bingo was
good
his name.
Good old Bingo.
And Gandalf tells Bingo, I fancy you would have to find one of the cracks of earth in the depths of the fiery mountain and drop it down into the secret fire if you really wanted to destroy it. I love that. The secret fire, which of course is vastly different from what we understand the secret fire to be in the Silmarillion. But yeah,
of course. And sometimes, it's very similar to how I run like my D&D campaigns or my TTRPG games within Middle Earth. Sometimes you get an idea and you're just set on it. And if it doesn't work in this scenario, maybe we can tweak it another way. But also keep in mind in the outline that Christopher says, quote, almost certainly dates from 1939.
Wow.
We read that Bingo reaches the crack, but cannot make himself throw it in anyway. He hears Necromancer's voice offering him great reward to share power with him if he will keep it. And that moment, Gollum, who has seemed to reform and has guided them by secret ways through Mordor, comes up and treacherously tries to take the ring. They wrestle, and Gollum takes the ring and falls into the crack. The mountain begins to crumble.
Wow. 1939, he already had that part set aside.
Yeah.
So, I am sure we're going to talk more about the development of that particular part of the story when I reach the chapter Mount Doom later on this season. For now, though, let's take a quick break and we'll come back to discuss the themes as we've seen them develop over the last 5 books and 5 PPP seasons. Well, folks, soon we'll get back to where we've been over the last 5 years. But before we do, we want to remind you that there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast than just me and Don.
The PPP has an amazing listener community, and I've been fortunate enough to speak to a lot of them. They are always coming up with great questions and discussion and memes. I feel like we
Yeah.
need to shout out the memes here a little bit.
Yeah, the memes and GIFs are pretty phenomenal, I got to admit.
If you're not familiar, a meme is an internet thing that everybody knows. It's just like one of those idioms in the English language, but told through moving pictures or
visual,
images.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
the visual idioms. So you can come check out the Common Room on Facebook, the dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
That's right. Now on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast. You can follow the page to get news and new episodes. But the thing is, you're going to really want to join the group to get in those great discussions.
Or if you would prefer Reddit, you can find us there at r/PrancingPonyPod on Twitter and Instagram. We're simply Prancing Pony Pod.
And if you want daily Tolkien content, well, check out Today's Tolkien Times on YouTube and all of your favorite podcast apps. It's my new short-form daily show with everything from Mailbag Monday to Silmarillion Saturday. Be sure to check it out at youtube.com/@TolkienTimes and follow @TolkienTimes on all your social media. And folks, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. It's what helps us make this show better every season. When you join, you get the best Discord community around. That includes all the memes, all the stuff. I mean, it's great times. It also includes live episode recordings and hangouts every month, episode postscripts, ad-free episodes, and a whole lot more.
You can also become a part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes. Some of, if it's not too much to say, my favorite interactions in the Tolkien community.
A lot of fun there.
It's so much fun. You can even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
And of course, you can always help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and a rating on Spotify. And please don't stop recommending us to your friends. Well, now it's time for us to do a quick recap of the story and themes so far, but this one's going to be a little bit different.
Right. So normally we'd recap the previous book for you, but with book 6, we are going to be picking up with Frodo and Sam, and we don't see them in book 5.
No, we don't. So instead, we're going to do a very quick recap of books 1, 2, and 4 at first to remind you what Frodo and Sam had been through when we last saw them, because Frodo and Sam were Sirs not appearing in books 3 or 5.
And if you do not understand that reference, you're too young to listen to this podcast. No, I'm kidding.
No, you just haven't watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail. We can get that fixed for you. Just let us know.
A fantastic movie. We will still do the recap, though, of book 5, even though they were absent from it. I think it'll be helpful just to kind of, we'll compare and contrast the themes that we saw in the last book with the ones that we are looking forward to in this one.
That's right. Plus, it's really only the first part of book 6 that is Frodo and Sam. We'll eventually end up right where we left off in book 5, so we need to recap those events and themes as well. And folks, remember, this is a Prancing Pony podcast recap, so we're generally assuming that you know the story. We're focusing primarily on themes here.
Right. The story has been told a lot of times. It's a story about a young gardener who finds his courage to... I'm not wrong.
No, you're not entirely wrong.
It's just a really long... And look, I could tell this story, this recap, many different ways. For Legolas, it was the equivalent of a long weekend out with some guys he met along the road.
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what is a year-long journey for him? That is just a
just about
weekend trip.
Yeah. And from Rivendell to Ring, can I spoil it? Do your readers know that the ring was destroyed?
The Lord of the Rings. They know the ring gets destroyed, of course.
I can just imagine someone not reading the books and only listening to this podcast and thinking,
oh, no.
This is how I'm going to find out. I need to know.
We have spoiled the entire story, of course. I mean, I think we tried to avoid spoilers in the Silmarillion, knowing that a lot of people were trying to make their way through that for the very first time.
Yeah.
But with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, we just have to assume, because it's so difficult otherwise, right? I mean, because there's so many times where we want to reference future events as being connected thematically. So we just assume that folks know the story and we go from there. So yeah.
The themes and the tones of the Lord of the Rings, as we sort of step into this, you can think of this as like this isn't your dad's insert noun here.
It's not your dad's Hobbit. No, it's very different feel, isn't it?
Oh my God. Can we put not your father's Hobbit on a t-shirt or something?
I think we probably could.
That
Not your
sounds
father's halfling,
amazing.
maybe. Hobbit might be a harder word to use.
Right. We gotta legally distinct from various other things. Anyway, the point of all of this being, the Lord of the Rings themes are darkened very early on in book one.
Oh, yeah.
We
Yeah.
are introduced to the world of the Silmarillion. There's things like the Black Riders and the Necromancer that are quickly intrude on what was a very simple sequel to The Hobbit very early on.
That's right. I mean, we start getting some of those backstory elements very, very early. I mean, even in the midst of the Shire itself, where it was, beautiful and peaceful and green and lovely, there was still this ever-present sense of danger. And that sense, of course, has only increased as the story has gone on. The tone has shifted significantly from the Hobbit days. Let's take a look at some of the individual themes. The first one I want to look at is fate and free will. Now, that early arc of Frodo and Sam gave us a lot of fate and free will back in books 1 and 2, especially as Frodo wrestled with his role in the events playing out. Not only when he left the Shire in book 1, but even when he made up his mind to go to Mordor in book 2, and he made that decision twice, right?
Yeah.
Once in Rivendell, and then again by himself, he thought, at Parth Galen.
Right. And keep in mind, Gandalf's words to Bilbo, or about Bilbo, was that he was meant to find the ring and that Frodo was meant to have it, which I interpret at least as Gandalf sort of seeing providence at work, that idea of fate.
Exactly. Iluvatar moving behind the scenes. And yet, simultaneously, Frodo still had to exercise the free will to do what must be done. And we remember that. I mean, wow, there's some great moments in the council, weren't there, about that?
Oh my God. The Council of Elrond is probably one of my favorite chapters.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite parts is that we learn the difference between fate, which is this idea that, Iluvatar's will is sort of played out and then just perceived by everybody in Arda, in Middle-earth. Yeah. And also the free will of the people of the world and the ability to, as the Silmarillion mentions about men, quote, shape their life amid the powers and chants of the world beyond the music. I love that quote so much.
Absolutely right. I love that quote as well. The quote that comes to my mind, though, is from the Council of Elrond, and it's that another fate and free will mix. It's after Frodo has said he will take the ring, though he doesn't know the way. Elrond says to him, "If I understand aright all that I have heard, I think that this task is appointed for you, Frodo. And that if you do not find a way, no one will." But then he says, "It is a heavy burden, so heavy that none could lay it on another. I do not lay it on you, but if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right." So it's both a task appointed and a choice.
Yeah.
And it's just fantastic. It's so rich.
It's such a duality too between all of that, that idea of fate. Because, oh yes, of course the ring gets destroyed. God said it was going to happen. Right. Well, that doesn't make for, that's the equivalent of why didn't they take the eagles to Mordor? Well, it doesn't make for a very good story.
Talk about Deus Ex Machina. I mean, that's quite literally Deus Ex Machina. Yeah.
And also keep in mind, we saw more of this theme in book 4 when Frodo and Sam seem more or less fated to enter Mordor with Gollum through Cirith Ungol. And there are so many quintessential moments of like, oh well, of course they chose to go there, that makes the most sense. But was it really? Was it fate? Was it designed that way? And was Ungoliant even a part of the plan? Because without Ungoliant, Shelob's mother, because think about it, Cirith Ungol doesn't exist without Shelob. Shelob does not exist without Ungoliant. Ungoliant, in her form that she is, does not exist without Morgoth. Morgoth does not exist without Iluvatar. It can all lead back to, honestly, Spabimi. The idea of Spabimi is right here, front and center.
Wow, first time that's come up already in season 8. For folks who are new to the show, just a quick reminder. In season 1, we came up with this acronym, SPBIMI. It's SPBMI. It stands for Shall Prove But Mine Instrument. And that's from a line in Ainulindale, which is the music of the Ainur and the creation of the world. And it's basically our shorthand way of referring to Iluvatar's plan being able to be worked out regardless of the circumstances. So even if somebody does something evil that's bad, that's not part of the original plan, Iluvatar is able to turn it around and use it in a way to still accomplish, whatever the music has predetermined would happen. So fantastic stuff. I'm trying to think of maybe some other book 4 moments of fate and free will. Faramir comes to mind.
I love his ability to reject the ring because it feels so much like free will. And, you know, that idea of I will not take the ring. I will stay. And, you know, it's a great foil to Boromir in that they are so different in that moment. And Faramir's, I don't want to call it a temptation because it wasn't really a temptation, but there is that moment of, was it always destined that like Frodo was going to be there? Or could it possibly be that maybe
Right.
Faramir is another instrument? Maybe Faramir, you know, tell me Tolkien didn't think about, well, maybe I just get Faramir to take him into Mordor. He's basically Aragorn light. Let's just, you know.
He really is. That's true.
Shelob's not a problem if you've got Faramir there and just, you know, all three of them hacking at this spider. Well, maybe still.
Well, especially plus all of Faramir's rangers, but yeah.
Well, you know what? Hear me out. I don't know if Faramir's rangers go into Cirith Ungol with him.
Well, I love this speculation. The idea that Faramir would actually take them with him, that he would lead the way. I don't know. I think his sense of duty to his father is a little too much to do that.
Yeah.
But I like
point.
the idea. I really do.
That's a good point. Well, maybe I'll make another alternate universe Lord of the Rings tabletop role playing game session
leads them
where
through.
Faramir takes them to Cirith Ungol. It'd be probably a little bit shorter, and I imagine. Does Faramir survive? That's a conversation for another time. We're talking about fate and free will. Sorry.
He's got to survive because otherwise, who's going to help rescue Eowyn from her despair? We're going to see that later this season when she is still
Ooh, yes, we are.
Really, really in the depths of that despair. And it's Faramir's absolutely selfless love for her that sort of brings her back. That's one of my favorite moments in the entire Legendarium that we'll get to later on with the Steward and the King. But ooh, that's much further on in the season. For now, I'm thinking of other book 4 moments. I mean, obviously, the choices of Master Samwise comes to mind. We'll see more of other themes in those moments. So I think we'll get to that a little bit later. But let's, in fact, move on to another one of those themes. And that's the theme of hope and despair. Now, going back to book 1, we started seeing this very early on in the Barrow Downs when Frodo nearly gave in to despair, abandoning his friends to die. But he chose not to. And we learn after that Bilbo and Gandalf both believed him to be the best hobbit in the Shire. Oh, high praise indeed.
That is perhaps the best praise you can have. There are a lot of great hobbits in the Shire. And keep in mind, you know, that theme of hope and despair continues throughout book 2. We've got things like Gandalf's death, where, you know, oh my gosh, there's this huge Balrog. Oh my gosh, we have hope Gandalf's going to win. And then there's that despair of,
we've lost Gandalf.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a Sean Astin quote in the behind the scenes of the Peter Jackson trilogy, where he says, well, yes, of course, good will win, but at what cost? What will be, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he says, what will be lost? And that idea of you can have so much hope, like, of course the ring is going to be destroyed. This is a fantasy story. I can read into the themes.
Yeah.
What's it going to cost you to succeed? And what despair will you feel?
Yeah.
In between then and now, and right up until the breaking of the Fellowship, when we see Aragorn start to have that moment of near despair, but he keeps doing what needs to be done. And then we see, you know, that play out really, really poignantly in book 3.
We do. He definitely had those moments there of near despair, giving up on, you know, every decision I make has gone wrong, that sort of thing. But he stuck to it and did what he needed to do, and certainly held on to hope, and that hope fueled their chase of Merry and Pippin.
I am often, you know, asked, why is it basically just a musical? Why did Tolkien write so many songs? What was the point of all of it? I skip those.
I used to too, though. In all fairness, I used to skip all the poetry and music. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I am ashamed to say it now.
In thinking, and this is what I love about coming on this podcast, Alan, is you give me different ways to think about Tolkien. I now see the lament for Boromir when they are singing at the river as almost a way to try and rekindle that hope.
Oh, yes.
To sing of the despair of loss and say, all right, we are grieving in this moment. This is our lamentation, quite literally, for this man that we lost. And our hope is, temporarily at least, being abated, and it's not there the way it was. We need something else. And I think for the first time in my life, I'm seeing this song totally differently, which again is good. I think I said this the last time I was on here. It's a new way to see Tolkien through this podcast, and I love it.
That's what we keep trying to do. Honestly, it's what we end up discovering ourselves. I mean, obviously for 6 years, it was me and Sean discovering new things every single episode. Yeah. And last year I was discovering new things every single episode with, half a dozen or more new co-hosts that were working with me all season. And every time I do this, every time I write an episode, I learn something new. No matter how many times I've gone through this, it's fantastic. Getting back to hope and despair, I've actually come back to Lothlorien, right? Galadriel and Celeborn in book 2, they give us a lot of opportunities to think about the way hope and despair interplay with one another in the fighting of the long defeat. There's this ultimate despair in the sense that we know eventually this is the long defeat. We have to leave. We're not going to be able to win this forever. But there's also hope that we can continue to win until it's time to go.
Yeah, the defeat implies that there will be an eventual loss, and I think that is the despair portion. You could almost call it the long despair instead of defeat, because it is kind of this idea of, oh man, this is going to be a forever thing. But then there is also that hope of, well, even if we are doomed, even if we are defeated, even if we are despairing, let's do some good along the way. Let's leave it better than we found it.
Exactly. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, because what you just talked about there is very much a Beowulf, Monsters and the Critics sort of thing, the circle of light. So we'll get to that. That's actually the next theme. But boy, let's talk about some of those book 4 moments. And we saw a lot of hope and despair in book 4. My goodness. Start us out. What was your big highlight for book 4?
I mean, let's not neglect the choices of Master Samwise and just entire chapter as a whole. It is...
He bounces from despair to hope. Well, mostly in despair. But
yeah. I mean, wouldn't you, right? We can all see Samwise Gamgee.
He's gotten this far with Frodo at his side. And now at the very moment, the very critical moment of the mission, he believes his master to be dead, and he's got to make a decision. And no matter what decision he makes, he knows he's convinced it's going to be the wrong one.
It is almost, and I've never drawn this parallel before, so help me workshop it live on this podcast as we record this.
I'll do my best.
Is Sam's loss of Frodo the almost equivalent of Frodo's loss of Gandalf?
It's certainly very similar in the sense that, Gandalf gave Frodo wisdom and gave him hope and was the leader. And Frodo, in turn, was Sam's leader and source of inspiration and hope. Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarity there.
And then he comes back.
And it's very different, though, of course, in that regard, because, Frodo doesn't know that Gandalf comes back until he wakes up in the field of Cormallen later in this book. I mean, we won't see that until, spring sometime, I think. And it is a fantastic moment, right, when Sam discovers the same thing.
And I think that is something that sort of gets lost on people as you read this, very heavy, thick book.
Like, so much going on. Yeah.
Tolkien does a pretty good job reminding us, like, oh, right, Frodo thinks he's dead. There's a couple of moments there, but I will occasionally find myself forgetting, like, oh, right, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have no idea where they are. They could be, there's that despair again, but also that hope. Are Frodo and Sam alive or dead? And then, we talk about book 4 where it is Frodo and Sam. Like, imagine Faramir just, I really hope they succeed in their quest. I have to go back to my city now because everything's falling apart. So Faramir, I think, is another there's another moment of hope and despair as well.
A little bit. There's a moment of hope that comes to mind, and that's in Journey to the Crossroads, I think, right before the very end of the chapter, when the sunlight comes streaming down on the crown of the king that has been taken off. The head of the king has been taken off that statue and defiled by the orcs. And there's this reminder. To me, it sort of feels like it's calling forward a moment that hasn't happened yet. It to me links with the moment that we'll see in this book when Sam looks up and sees the star through the rack of cloud.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's this thing that even in the midst of all this darkness, there's still the stars. And that moment was, even with the clouds covering everything, there's still this last ray of sun. The sun is still out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was short-lived, but it was powerful and moving and really did serve to inspire both Frodo and Sam, I think.
A little bit of thematic foreshadowing there as well.
I think so.
I think also we're missing a pretty big character. Gollum and Smeagol, I think, are the perfect dichotomy of hope and despair. Hope that Smeagol can be saved, and despair that Gollum might be the one to wrest control of the body, of the mind, of everything. And it is that duality of Gollum's struggle that can be interpreted so many different ways. I mean, we've talked about it previously on this podcast about how Gollum represents so many things to so many different people. There's, people that struggle with addiction. There's people that struggle with depression and anxiety, or just a melancholy, a sense of despair or isolation. And there's so many, sorry, I'm naming way more themes.
No, you're right, though. You're absolutely right. I mean, I'm thinking of even the despair that Frodo and Sam felt when they got to the Black Gate and realized, well, I guess this is it.
Yeah.
And they're going to go do it. And Gollum said, no, we've got another way.
Wait a minute.
So he gives them a hope, though it's really honestly a false hope. But at the same time, there is no hope at all of getting through the Black Gate itself. None.
No.
And then there's Shelob's lair. Shelob's lair was filled with total despair. Just this idea they're never going to be able to get out. My goodness, so much. And then Frodo holding aloft the vial of Galadriel, literally hope in his hand. But let's go ahead and take a look at another theme. And this is very similar to Hope and Despair. It's not quite the same. I want to talk about the two essays that we've referenced so often on the Prancing Pony podcast that are sort of the opposite extremes, the Tolkien being a man of dichotomies as he was. And that's Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics, and On Fairy Stories. So with Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics, we talk a lot about things like the little circle of light being surrounded by darkness and backs against the wall, and that sort of, northern ethos of, okay, we're going to die, but we're going to die going out, in style. We're going to fight, and even though we have no chance of victory. And on the other hand, you have On Fairy Stories, in which Tolkien introduced the idea of the eucatastrophe, which he was an absolute master at writing. So even though there's a lot of hope and despair in those two themes, they're separate enough that I wanted to talk through that. Going back to book 1, for instance, the Shire itself was a little circle of light surrounded by darkness, right? Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin going out to do battle with the monsters, which they quite literally did in book 2. Those are some very early examples. Yeah.
Again, we've mentioned it before on this episode, the idea of that long defeat, that's right out of Beowulf, the Monsters and Critics.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
And then we've already mentioned it as well, the whole idea of Lorien, that circle of light, the thing Frodo is literally holding in his hands, the potential foreshadowing of all of that. Yeah,
that's true. And then, of course, in books 1 and 2, we did see a lot of moments in terms of eucatastrophes, smaller eucatastrophes, from On Fairy Stories, sort of light. Instead of the circle of light within the darkness, we saw the light itself. So everything from Gildor and the Woody End to Tom Bombadil, all of these are sort of mini eucatastrophes that serve to save our protagonists along the way while also giving us moments of light.
Yeah, and I think that light is so important to maintain, and why these mini eucatastrophes, as we'll call them, are so important to the themes. Because, like, yes, of course, the hobbits are going to be saved by someone stronger than them. Everything is stronger than them. When they get in trouble,
doesn't take much. Yeah,
no, it doesn't take much. And but also keep in mind, right? There's that deep, that sort of fairy resonance of Lorien. The hobbits are in the heart of elvendom on Earth. We have that idea of like the hope, the safety, the sanctuary. These eucatastrophes take so many different forms. And then Tolkien is also weaving in the fairy themes as well, the recovery, the escape, the consolation of the fellowship after what is an incredibly, as we've mentioned before on this episode as well, a traumatic moment, not just for Frodo, but for the fellowship as a whole in Moria.
That's a very good point. Yeah, recovery, escape, and consolation being absolutely central to the idea of fairy story. Going on into book 4, it did bring some more of the same. I think of Henetha Noon as a little circle of light in the midst of this sort of Mordor-dominated Ithilien. And then I think we saw a lot of little eucatastrophes throughout. What were some of the eucatastrophes, the little mini eucatastrophes that you saw in book 4?
Well, I was of course going to say Faramir, but you say eucatastrophe, a mini eucatastrophe. But so the thing about, eucatastrophes as a theme is it's moments of danger, it's moments of darkness, it's things like the dead marshes, it's the darkness, and when Frodo falls in and Gollum is pulling him out, and there is that moment of, oh my goodness, we've been saved by the most unexpected thing ever. Or honestly, it's not necessarily a mini eucatastrophe, but Sam deciding to go on his own. That's not necessarily an external force, but he's put in a situation where, okay, the main character that we've been following from the beginning is gone. My turn. And that becomes almost, maybe not as much, but it's still.
Well, certainly I think the way his fight with Shelob ends was sort of another mini eucatastrophe. There was virtually no chance, even with Sting and the vial, that he could defeat or drive off Shelob. And yet the only thing that would end up doing so was Shelob driving her own weight down on Sting itself. There's no way he could have penetrated that hide.
It reminds me of, obviously, The Lord of the Rings has a few of these in it. And then the Marvel movie, Avengers Civil War, where the bad guy realizes the only thing that can destroy the Avengers is the Avengers themselves. The only thing that can destroy Shelob is Shelob herself. And that's true of Sauron almost to a point as well. Yeah. Sauron doesn't...
If he had not put all of his strength into the ring...
Exactly.
The destruction of the ring wouldn't have done anything to him.
Exactly. Yeah. So it becomes that little mini eucatastrophe of almost like a hubris, that sort of fatal flaw of either the main characters or the villains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, I mean, I know there's more, and folks, trust me when I say we could probably spend an entire episode on each of these themes, since we're talking about 4 or 5 books worth of stuff.
You could start a podcast on just each one of these themes.
You really probably could.
Yeah.
But we want to keep moving, and so we're going to go back to a different theme now. In this case, we're going to talk about the fellowship theme. So now we're going back to books 1 and 2. Obviously, from the title of the volume, it's pretty clear that we should expect a lot of fellowship moments. You know, we get a lot of that with Frodo and Bilbo, especially in Rivendell. Just some fantastic stuff there. Yeah.
And keep in mind, it's also the 4 hobbits. We've got the thing at Crick Hollow. They're sticking together through thick and thin. There's
taking the bath at the end of day. I love that moment. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a light moment too, that I think a lot of people are like, why would Tolkien write a bath scene together? Well, like, this is the last, this is the last lighthearted whimsy we're going to get for a little bit. Just buckle up, because there's that hobbitry, that joking around, just like, it's very reminiscent. It sort of harkens back to my other hyperfixation of World War I.
Oh, yeah.
And soldiers in the trenches using, you know, that sort of lighthearted, sometimes it's gallows humor, sometimes it's just propping each other up in the trenches of World War I. And I think Tolkien really leaned into that.
I think he did. Yeah.
And then there's that really amazing, you know, one of my favorite portions of the books is the fellowship getting to know each other in book 2, just like talking, having those conversations, which I think I get why it wasn't a big part of it. I do wish we had gotten a little bit more of that from the movies, just that extra level of like Merry and Pippin learning to sword fight with Boromir, and Gimli and Legolas having a conversation with that brotherhood, that camaraderie, that fellowship is so quintessential to the entire story.
Yeah, especially I think that Gimli Legolas thread, it would have been nice to see more of that. But yeah, we definitely saw plenty of it in the book. And then going to book 4, we saw even more of these moments, right? It was a smaller fellowship at this point. It's just Frodo and Sam for the most part, growing closer in their friendship. And then honestly, a sort of unexpected fellowship of sorts with Faramir. I really liked that.
Yeah, and I think Tolkien does a really great job with that one, because the idea of Faramir is very easy, I think, to mess up. He could be just the next big human in their way that gets tempted by the ring, and Frodo is constantly over and over again, you know, having to fight back against this idea of, you know, the temptation will always be there. But instead, we get this really, as you said, unexpected camaraderie. Faramir is not tempted by the ring the same way Boromir was, and it harkens back to that hope and despair theme weaving in with fellowship. You bring that to the table, and suddenly you've got a character that is an unexpected comrade, an unexpected fellow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same could be said for Gollum.
Well, that's the thing. Gollum is interesting. I mean, I guess you could say in some ways Smeagol, Frodo does try to form a little bit of a fellowship with Smeagol.
I think we need to make that distinction that Smeagol is the theme of fellowship. If we're going to, and again, we're using this very loosely, but I think if we're going to do anything, the idea of Smeagol being the thing, the person, the fellowship, the idea, the mindset that maybe all hope is not lost. Maybe together we can accomplish more. Maybe there are things that we can do
Sam never
to
buys
make it easier.
Sam never buys it.
And you know what? I don't blame him.
No, but it is sad because, of course, there is that one moment where Gollum is just about ready to possibly turn. And Sam, you know, and even Tolkien talks about it in his letters as this being Sam's kind of big screw up, right? I mean, this is when Sam made a mistake, and it's really heartbreaking to see. But you know, Tolkien does explain that Gollum was very unlikely to actually convert. But, you know, he did speculate about what might have happened if he had. There was speculation about how, you know, Gollum, it might have ended the same way, but in the sense that Gollum would have known that Frodo couldn't do this, and he would have taken the ring and thrown himself in, voluntarily.
Yeah.
It's some very interesting ideas that Tolkien came up with, sort of, speculating and bouncing around. But that's not really fellowship, so we'll move on from that to Ring at Work. What did we see in the Ring at Work, going back maybe to books 1 and 2?
Right. So the Ring at Work, obviously, mostly Frodo. This is a very Frodo-centric portion of it.
That's
but,
true.
we do see others as well. Other characters are involved with the ring.
Bilbo had trouble leaving Bag End and even handing the ring off. Aragorn, the ring didn't necessarily work on him, but it tried when he was tempted at the Prancing Pony. I know we spent a lot of time talking about this on the show. I believe firmly that Aragorn knew he would someday face that temptation and had already prepared in his mind for that moment. And so for him, it was just turning something that was a rehearsal into reality. He already knew how to respond.
Practicing so many times and I know my lines. I know what I need to do. This is the action I need to take.
Yeah.
Boom.
Because he knew he was going to face it at some point under some set of circumstances. Yeah.
You think Aragorn overthinks a lot of things a lot? I've often wondered how.
I think he does tend to. You look at the way he's afraid his decisions will lead, to the wrong, conclusion, so to speak, when he
Merry and Pippin, or going after Merry and Pippin, going after Frodo and Sam. Yeah,
he's thinking ahead of what all the options, what all the things could be. I can feel that.
Yeah,
I have a tendency to do the same sort of thing. Yeah. Not that I'm like Aragorn in any other way. Let's just be clear. All right. Other than the fact that I'm very dangerously close to 88.
Dangerously implies you're in your 80s, I think.
Well,
you're
no,
nowhere
that's
near that.
No, I'm like
He's in
your
his
lifetime
70s,
away,
folks.
I think I'm your life. Wow. I think I'm pretty much your lifetime away from 88, so that's all right.
Listen, I have gone an hour and 3 minutes into this recording without making an old person joke. I feel
that's
as though
fair.
I'm due one.
You have earned the right.
Thank you. Right. Someone, though, that the ring does not work on, very thematically, Tom Bombadil. Just
not even in the slightest. And not only does it not work on him in the sense that it doesn't tempt him, it doesn't work to wear the ring around him. The effects of the ring aren't even seen by him. So
He's
weird.
just like, no, I'm good. It's fine. You have it back.
Where are you going, Frodo? Where be you a going? Yeah.
Oh my God. Can we bring that sort of language back? Can we all just talk like, where be you a going? And can we all talk in iambic pentameter?
No, it is not iambic pentameter. It is trochaic tetrameter. So trochaic tetrameter features lines composed of 4 trochaic feet. And so it would be dumpta, 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 dumpta. So there's 4 feet. Each one is with the first syllable stressed.
Without the explanation, I do kind of feel like you would be making this up, but the fact that you did the dunta dunta, like you took the Wikipedia article and then you summarized it using da dunta 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 dunta. And honestly,
no,
I respect
dumpta. It's you just went back into iambic pentameter, which is
excuse me,
the second syllable being stressed.
Oh,
that's what makes this so weird. Is it's the first syllable stressed. Where be you a going, Frodo?
Oh my God. This is the weirdest conversation we've ever had on this podcast. Let's move on to
what's crazy is Tolkien did all this and let me have a guy talk like this wacky meter. I don't remember when we were speculating about this, but I think Sean and I were discussing, what if he just changed his meters every month or every season? They just happened to come upon him during his trochaic tetrameter phase. Sorry, trochaic tetrameter phase. What if they came 6 months later and he was in iambic pentameter or some other meter?
Okay, so
what if he was just in his beatnik phase and he was just snapping his fingers all the time?
So do you remember that Google Drive reference I made a couple of minutes ago?
I do.
I'm imagining him coming up to Christopher and going, "Kid, you're not going to believe this. I rewrote the Tom Bombadil chapter 8 times
in different meters.
These are all different meters, Dad. What did you do?" And go, "I was really bored one night, Chris. I really wanted to, I couldn't figure out which one worked. And so I wrote all of them. And now I want to include all of them."
That's awesome.
I want that.
That's brilliant.
I want the next extended edition of the book, like the Baron and Luthien and Fall of Gondor portion, to just
have 6 versions of the Tom Bombadil
the Tom Bombadil chapter over and over.
You
and
might
over
be the
again.
only person on the planet who would want that. Actually, there's so many people that don't like Tom, which I understand. I actually like Tom, but he is a very different character.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I think Goldberry would just grow tired of to pentameter after a while. Like, can we talk differently than
Can we
this?
do something? Can we do literally anything else?
Yeah, something, please. All right. So Tom, the ring doesn't work on Tom, and neither does iambic pentameter at this point.
No, but you know who it does work on is Galadriel. Galadriel's got that meltdown. All shall love me and despair.
Nuclear Galadriel.
Nuclear.
Yeah, I do love that moment in the books. I mean, to his credit, Jackson used almost the exact dialogue from the text. So
yes,
it's just he added that sort of, in my opinion, sort of nonsensical, glowing thing, but it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Yeah,
definitely the ring tempted her for sure. And I don't know whether she had prepared the way Aragorn had. Aragorn knew he would one day face the ring because he knew that it was in Bilbo's possession and then Frodo's possession. And he knew that Gandalf wanted Frodo to take the ring and leave. So he knew he was going to be encountering it. Galadriel, until Frodo showed up on her doorstep with the ring, which I'm sure she knew was present the moment he came into Moria.
Instantly.
So that means her preparation was just a matter of days, as opposed to Aragorn, who probably had been thinking about this or pondering it for years.
Okay, well, riddle me this, Batman, then, because now I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Galadriel
probably was preparing herself just in case something like that happened. No? Yeah.
I mean, I would think so. Certainly there's the very likely fact that she would have gotten word from Elrond that the Fellowship was leaving with the ring. That she would have known either through Elladan and Elrohir or through some other scouts, or even through Osanwe, right? Through the telepathic messages.
Yeah.
And the ability to communicate that elves possess. Well, actually that all beings possess, but that the more mortal you are, the more tied to your body you are, the harder it is to use that skill.
Yeah, sorry, I got this body. It won't stop. I'm sorry.
Man, Osanwe is such a fascinating concept. I love that. But anyway, I totally digress by getting into that. But the idea is that she did probably know, now that I think about it, even before that moment when Frodo stepped in. So yeah, I think she'd probably have been preparing.
I dig it. I can see it. I can see it happening.
And then, of course, the ring really, really did work quite effectively, sadly, on poor Boromir. And I'm so glad that he repented, that he had an opportunity to realize his wrong and then to make that wrong right by fighting to protect Merry and Pippin. That arc of his, that all too brief redemption arc, is one of my favorite moments in the entire books. It's just fantastic.
Easily.
But yeah, there's no doubt the ring worked on him. Absolutely. It did exactly what it was intending to do, and it got him good. That's for sure.
As you've made my mind turn all of these ways, I'm now thinking about, the what if scenario of what if he survives? What if he, what if he's injured enough that he can't go after Merry and Pippin, but he's like, I have to make it up to.
So he goes and try to find Frodo and Sam on the other side of the river?
And everything happens again and again and again. Yeah. No. Okay. Maybe not.
Bad idea.
Yeah.
We talked about this at the time, that Boromir's temptation by the ring is what in essence helped the quest actually survive. Frodo
absolutely.
had to leave when he left. He absolutely had to leave when he left. And there would have been no other force that would have triggered his departure than something like this. It really was the thing that needed to happen.
And I think that was as fun as it is to speculate, as I so often do, that is sort of how I explain it to people. Like, yes, as a matter of fact, Boromir did need to, die. And there's a reason that, or
at least he needed to try to take the ring. I mean, what if he had lived? What if he had gone with the three hunters and, all of that? We could talk about that. We could talk about, one of my favorite speculations is, what if Denethor did send Faramir in Boromir's stead, because he's the one who had the dream, and then Boromir was the one in Ithilien. Oh crap. Yeah. Ooh boy.
I don't think Frodo gets out of Ithilien
I don't think he does either. I don't.
Wow. What a cool thought experiment.
Like, these little experiments, like, well, what if? Some great stuff.
Do you want to start a what if podcast for Lord of the Rings and just speculate for a couple hours?
That might actually be a really good segment. Wouldn't that be a fun segment to introduce? Maybe a what if segment.
Can we do that?
I think
Are we allowed to do that?
I don't think there are any rules that say I can't. It's my show. I can do that if I want.
Alan, do you want to start another podcast?
I don't know about another
project?
podcast. That's why I'm saying an intro segment, my friend. I don't think I could start anything more right now. Not with today's Tolkien Times, just finishing up a book, narrating the audiobook. Yeah.
You're a bit busy, aren't you?
I am actually, yeah. Surprising.
Oh my goodness. All right. So yes, 100% Boromir is the quintessential The Ring at work. So much so that even in the alternate realities, The Ring is still at work through Boromir. And then of course, Frodo's whole idea of The Ring at work, obviously on Frodo, gets even more so pushed onto Frodo in book 4.
Oh, of course, as he gets closer to Mordor and as he becomes connected to Gollum, especially through the ring, as the ring is sort of the source of his authority over Gollum.
Yeah.
And speaking of Gollum, we see the ring working against him repeatedly, leading eventually, of course, to his betrayal.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the lure to Shelob's lair.
And that is, I think, perhaps the most Gollum portion of the Ring at work, because, you know, Gollum was hanging out for 500-ish years in that cave. Ring wasn't, you know, he was still, but now it's right in front of him. Yeah. Well, all of a sudden we're going to crank that up to 11 then, aren't we?
Yes, we are. It goes to 11. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about the ring being incredibly successful in its work against Boromir. But how about the ring not being very successful in its work against Faramir in book 4? That was fantastic.
I love that, because I think if you run into a situation where, you know, it's almost like the flipping the trope on its head. Yeah, well, you met this guy, wait till you meet his brother. And like, you know, mob movies, gangster movies, all those like superhero ones, like, well, but wait, there's something much worse lurking behind the corner. It's his brother. We call him Tiny, or whatever the heck his name. Like, it's, I don't know, something
and now
silly.
I'm picturing Faramir being called Tiny.
Frodo was going to be named Bingo. At this point, you could probably get away with anything.
And Aragorn was going to be named Trotter. That is true.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. You know, so often the brother is sort of this trope, and here comes Faramir, and he's nothing like Boromir.
He's just a guy, and he does not have the same, I don't want to say mannerisms, because they are similar in a lot of ways.
They're very similar. Remember, Frodo finds him being so similar that it strikes him right away, the similarity with Boromir. But what's different is, and we learn this actually in the text, there's a little bit about how the Númenórean blood runs true in Denethor and in Faramir. Not so much in Boromir. And I think it's that helps him to be this thoughtful, planning, careful. And you notice that what he's done is he's set himself up in such a way that even though the ring might tempt him, he now is bound by the oath that he swore. You know, I would take now those words as an oath, he says. The whole thing about, if I found this thing that I don't know what it is, but it must be a powerful weapon of the enemy. If I found this thing lying by the side of the highway and I was the only one who could save Minas Tirith and I had to use it to do that, no. And then when he finds out, oh, it's the ring. It's the ring, the one ring. Well, now I have to take those words as an oath. I can't, I'm not going to even be tempted by it. It's like he shut the door on any potential temptation and it's just locked. There's no power that the ring can have to overcome that because he's such a man of honor. And I get that why they changed that in the films, because how do you literally have a perfect man?
You know,
how do you have a guy who's flawless?
I mean, Viggo Mortensen is right there, Alan.
That's true. It's really, really tricky. You know, but that's the thing. We talk about in the films, Jackson portraying the ring as being super powerful and that men cannot resist its call. Men will always fail, right? Elrond's famous line, men are weak. And we're seeing Isildur being portrayed differently in the film than he is in the books in terms of his decision-making and things. But Aragorn, you know, at the top of Parthgallan, grabs Frodo's hand and folds it shut back on the ring and says, I would have gone with you to the very fires of Mordor. Aragorn does fight the temptation of the ring in the films. So they could have done that with Faramir, but I understand why they chose not to, because Aragorn's the hero. You got to let Aragorn have his day. And then it's the whole arc thing, and we've gone into this 100 times, the idea that, well, they didn't have Shelob, so they have to have an antagonist, and then they have to give him an arc so that he develops from this way to this way. And because this is what Jackson so often did, the trigger of that arc is one of the hobbits. It's Sam and Sam's dialogue that changes Faramir's mind. Just like it's Pippin who changes Treebeard's mind after the Ents say, no, we're not going to go, which is different from the books, because in the books, the Entmoot decides we're marching on Isengard.
Yep.
In the films, they say, nah, never mind, not our problem. And then Pippin tricks him, takes him to that grove where all the trees are gone. And it's Pippin that then triggers Treebeard's arc. So,
God, these Hobbit folks they're so important to the story. My gosh.
They really are. And Jackson does a decent job of making them even more important. It just kind of tweaks to the story. But yeah, so the ring didn't work against Faramir. Sure did work against Gollum. So any other big ring at work moments from book 4 that you can think of? I know we got plenty in book 6 that we'll talk about in a bit. Yeah.
How about the Witch King? Because the Witch King is, when Frodo and Sam and Gollum are feeling his presence and he's right there, and almost that physical manifestation of, oh, this is the thing that will kill me that isn't a metaphor.
Right. So when the Witch King leads the forces out of Minas Morgul, that's right. I remember now, because the text, it says something, and I'm going to look it up real quick. He felt only the beating upon him of a great power from outside. It took his hand, and as Frodo watched with his mind, not willing it, but in suspense, as if he looked on some old story far away, it moved the hand inch by inch towards the chain upon his neck. Then his own will stirred. Slowly it forced the hand back and set it to find another thing, a thing lying hidden near his breast. Cold and hard it seemed as his grip closed on it, the vial of Galadriel.
And there's that hope and despair.
That was a very close moment. Without the vial, he loses that battle.
Yeah, he does. And that's there again is that hope and despair being weaved into the ring at work. Tolkien's a genius. I keep saying this, but like he put so much thought and effort into it. And it's only in, peeling back the many, many layers. Like, you ever see something and you can't quite explain why you like it, but it speaks to you?
Oh, yeah.
I feel as though that's Tolkien for so many people. But as soon as someone puts it into perspective, it's like, oh, that's that's why.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show from the very beginning. Because for me, for a very long time, Tolkien was that way. I could not explain to people why I liked it so much. And as I started to dive deeper into the themes and recognizing sort of the connections between all the works, I was like, okay, this is one of the reasons why I like this. The inconsistency of reality is probably the number one reason, right? This world building that feels so real from the very get-go. Right. But yeah, the tying together of these themes. Great stuff.
Great stuff.
Well, that takes us up to book 5 and last season, where we really saw the themes shift as the storyline split up again, right? We had Gandalf and Pippin going to Minas Tirith, where we finally meet Denethor, Merry staying with Theoden, of course, the whole Éowyn storyline, but then you get Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas making their way through the paths of the dead. So it's a totally different set of storylines than what we were experiencing with the Frodo Sam storyline in book 4.
I'm quite the sucker for Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli going on adventures. So when I was watching the movie and also reading the book, I'm like, yay, it's just the two towers, but with the stakes raised. And
that's right.
There's just there's this other random group that's just, there.
Well, except in the movie, the random group doesn't even show up. Like, where are the Rangers? Where is the Great Company?
I can see how introducing another 20 characters to the story might be a little...
Might have been nice to introduce Elladan and Elro here and maybe Halbrand, but okay.
Well, they had the Ewoks in Star Wars, and, that was made to sell teddy bears. I feel like this didn't have much marketability to include.
Teddy bears of the Grey Company? I don't know. I think it's been able to sell some plushies of the Grey Company. All right.
I'll let you try.
I'm not sure I want to go there, actually. I really not. Poor Halbrand. So let's start with Ring at Work, because that sounds like an easy one, right? There's probably not a whole lot there.
Yeah, definitely not too much happening in book 5. Remember, Denethor and then his reaction to the conversation between him, Gandalf, and Faramir. He would have kept the ring, but hidden.
I wouldn't have used it. No, Gandalf, I'm sure I wouldn't have used it. I would have.
No, of course not.
Just like I was supposed to hide the Palantir. Yeah.
He also knew that Boromir would 100% have been like, hey, Dad, I have been craving your approval for 30 plus years. Here you go.
Except, of course, I think he was wrong. And Gandalf told him that as well. Yeah, Boromir would have taken it with the idea of bringing it to you, but he would have kept it himself, because that's what the ring does to people.
Yeah. There's really no escaping it. It's that line from Galadriel, one by one, they're all going to be tempted. You're all going to fall under it. Like, there's no getting out of it.
Unless you're Faramir. But
Faramir is the exception. He is for all intents and purposes, the self-insert character in a way, as he's kind of came out of whole cloth, out of thin air maybe. And
a little bit. I do love the letters to Christopher that Tolkien writes about how, we've encountered a new character. I didn't even intend to bring him on the scene, but lo and behold, here's this Faramir guy.
He's just some guy, and he's here, and he's gonna save everything. And oh shoot, what do I do with that human woman? Oh right,
Well, speaking of Denethor, I mean, his despair and suicide were certainly connected more to the Palantir than to the ring. But I have to say, it was the certainty that he had. I mean, it was incorrect, but the certainty that he had that Sauron had the ring that contributed to that despair. And that's what he thought he saw in the Palantir. But of course, it
yeah,
wasn't really true because Sauron never had it. But so indirectly, certainly the ring contributed to the despair that he felt, but
for sure.
it wasn't working directly on him like we would have seen it working directly on others.
He would have fallen pretty quickly, I think.
Oh yeah, if the ring had somehow made it to Minas Tirith. Can you imagine if Frodo brought the ring to Minas Tirith thinking, well, it'll be safe here?
I think we've established the only thing I do is think of Middle-earth alternate universes at this point
That's
in my
true.
career. So yeah.
Yeah, we better be careful about that one because we could just go down that road for a very long time.
Very true.
All right, but of course we have a lot more themes than just the ring at work. Don, what do we have?
Next up, we've got some pretty opposites of the extreme. A lot of the themes we see, as we've mentioned previously, the Beowulf, the monsters and the critic, and on fairy stories. So we've got quite a bit of that here in book 5. So many of just like opposites of hope and despair.
That's the whole thing. I mean, Tolkien was a man of dichotomies. He had these light and dark, hope and despair, fate and free will. And this idea of taking on fairy stories and Beowulf, the monsters and the critics is a way for us to look at sort of the way that Tolkien crafted these stories with these ideas in mind. So let's start with the Beowulf moment. So here I'm talking about circle of light stuff. This is the good guys standing in the circle of light, knowing they're surrounded by the monsters. You're facing certain defeat, but you go and face them anyway. First thing that comes to my mind, I don't know, what do you think about Paths of the Dead? At least from Gimli's perspective, this seemed like certain death.
For sure. And I think the beauty of me being here for book 5 was that I remember reading that part about Gimli in the Paths of the Dead. And it struck me how good of a horror genre writer Tolkien is. But it then occurred to me, I think, while we were recording our first, that very episode, that a lot of that horror was probably experienced firsthand in the very real world experiences in World War One.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, things like the Passage of the Dead Marshes are absolutely reminiscent of what he would have experienced on the Somme. Paths of the Dead, a little different, but certainly that kind of otherworldly fear, might be something that he was drawing on.
It's a march almost that like going to certain death is also, very heavily handed. The Ents do it, Gimli and the Grey Company, everyone do it in the Paths of the Dead. It's interesting though to contrast that with the way you go to certain air quotes, because of course not everybody dies, but certain death. The Ride of the Rohirrim's initial charge does not feel like this at all.
No, you're right.
They had, the numbers. They are a cavalry.
Yeah, it's more of an on fairy stories moment. It's a catastrophe. They show it up, right?
It is. The very last minute, all of a sudden, here is this other group also willing to charge into certain death to save not people, but their neighbors, their human comrades, if you will. Right. So charging that leader, and it's quite the momentous upswing. Contrasting, though, Gimli's sort of perspective of like going into certain death, the Rohirrim's initial charge does not feel like that at all. They, they have the upper hand. They are
it's more
marching.
Of a catastrophe than it is
exactly.
Yeah.
But, and as such is the theme with Tolkien, things change much later and sometimes very quickly. Theoden charging the leader and the standard of the Southrons seem to sort of fit this.
That's a fair point. Yeah. I mean, because by that point, he doesn't have the numbers anymore. He's successful. He certainly is the victor in that battle, but it's definitely sort of backs against the wall. We're on the field of battle here. We're not here to survive the day. We're here to save Gondor, even at the cost of our own lives. Yeah, the Circle of Light moment there would strike me as being, when the Witch King arrives for sure. I mean, at that point, Theoden's lost his battle. He's thrown by his horse and he's mortally wounded.
Which I think is something that not everybody, well, maybe I'm projecting a bit because I didn't see it at first. It never struck me until many years later. Theoden isn't killed by the Witch King exactly.
No, he's killed by his horse.
He's killed by his horse, as so many real life actual rulers in European history have been.
That's fair. That is fair. I'm thinking of another Circle of Light moment. Probably the
Mm.
biggest one is, or at least the most obvious one that I can think of from book 5, is that force of just 7,000, which of course would have actually been smaller by the time they left some of them to go to Cairandros, so maybe 6,000, that arrived at the Black Gate, ready to take on the forces of Sauron, knowing they were outnumbered 10-1. They were marching to their deaths, their certain deaths. They all knew that. And that is absolutely the classic Circle of Light moment. You know, this idea of backs against the wall, going out there in the darkness, facing the monsters, even though you know you're not going to be able to win. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thankfully, Tolkien was a man of dichotomies, as we've talked about before. And that is, even though he brings these really heavy moments, these kind of certain defeat moments, he also has the on fairy story moments, right? These are the ones where we talk about recovery, escape, and consolation. Of course, the consolation of the happy ending, which is the eucatastrophe. Let's not forget, though, it's easy to jump into the eucatastrophes because there are a lot of them. But let's talk a little bit about recovery and escape first as well.
We got a lot of that, especially in this book. A lot of that. We've got the recovery, synonymous with healing sometimes in the modern age. The houses of healing, you know, that chapter, how important that is to setting up the sort of end game for Éowyn, for Faramir, for Merry, even for Aragorn a little bit himself, as he sort of grows and shows the other side of him. And they're all healed by Aragorn. And sort of as he's doing this, they're responding very differently to what Aragorn is doing.
True. They each had their own very unique response to that healing with the Athelas and Aragorn laying on hands. Yeah.
I love that part.
That really was. That was one of my favorite moments in the chapters this last season was walking through that with Sarah Brown. That was a lot of fun. I think in past read-throughs, that's an area that's easy to sort of skim because you're like, all right, get everybody better. Let's get moving. Let's get back to the battle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you miss so much detail if you do that. You know,
yeah, you really do. Out. It's funny. I think back to one of the first times I read it, and I don't know if anybody else used to read like this as a kid. If there were really long paragraphs, I would skim it and just immediately look for quotation marks. It's like, all right, who's talking? Where? That's why I gravitated so early to comic books. I was like, it's just people talking and flashy
It's just the dialogue, right?
Yeah, and that's what caught my interest. So
okay, well, it must have been a challenge for you to read Tolkien because he's notorious for pages of narrative without dialogue.
I did struggle, and I had the audiobooks to help me through, thank goodness. But it's definitely a challenge your first time, maybe even your second. It's not for everybody, but I digress.
That is a really good set of recovery moments. There's one that I didn't put in our notes, but it just came to mind, and it's the Army of the Dead. They get their escape finally. They're finally able to honor their oath, to live up to what they promised they would do. And now they finally get the gift of Iluvatar. They finally get the release that their souls have been craving for, a couple thousand years. That's an escape right there, and a consolation in a way, for sure. But consolation, really, or the consolation of the happy ending, specifically the eucatastrophe, there are a bunch. So let's just kind of mention them. Maybe we can talk through them a little bit. Obviously, I say obviously, these are all big ones, right?
Well, some involve way more people than others, and
That's
true. I love that.
I think the arrival of the Rohirrim, right? The cock crowing and the Witch King and his standoff against Gandalf, realizing something has changed, right? I no longer have the upper hand.
Yeah.
But even in the eucatastrophe of the Rohirrim arriving, we have this sort of mini eucatastrophe of Khan Buri Khan being able to help them arrive at the battlefield intact and secretly, instead of having to face a battle on that road leading from Rohan to Minas Tirith, and then arriving later and in smaller numbers after a battle.
And you want to talk about happy endings? How about Han Buri Han's happy ending of the Rohirrim basically saying, hey,
we'll leave you alone now. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for the help. Have fun.
And that gets confirmed in book 6, of course, by Aragorn, who does the same thing, who basically says this land, the Druadan Forest, now no longer belongs to Gondor or Rohan. It is
its own place.
The land of the people of Khan Buri Khan, the Woses, which, of course, we know from Unfinished Tales as the Druadan. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
We've, of course, got more Baragon saving Faramir.
Oh, man. Well, yeah, Gandalf saving him first, but then Baragorn saving him from certain death. Yeah.
There's a lot of saving Faramir from certain death in this series,
as
we learn. And then goes without saying, Merry and Eowyn's fight and defeat of the Witch King of Angmar.
Oh my goodness.
Great moment.
Absolutely.
Great moment.
Huge eucatastrophe because it took both of them to do it. We'll also get to that, I think, when we talk about fate and free will, because there's, with the involvement of the prophecy and all of that, as well as Eowyn and Merry's choices to get to the battlefield. But I think the big eucatastrophe, the moment, if we have to define a single eucatastrophe, it is the arrival of Aragorn. That is the moment that turns everything, right? That's the one where Éomer, who was ready to just die right there on that hill, he'd formed a shield wall, he was ready to go down fighting, throws his sword in the air. He realizes that's it. We've won. This is not more orcs showing up. This is not the Southern showing up. These are the good guys. And it's all of the forces from Pelargir, all the forces from the Southern fiefdoms. It is not the army of the dead, for those of you who'd forgotten. It is the arrival of Aragorn and no ghosts whatsoever. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Peter Jackson, for making our jobs a lot harder. Well, you see, the ghosts, they can't actually fight, but they can scare people. And it's like, anyway.
I don't know. I still think they can have physical impact, right? Remember, I think we talked about this. There's the guy that they found, Brego, right? Or no, Brego's the name of the horse. What was the guy? I can't remember his name now.
Is it Baldur?
Yeah. They find him at the door, clawing at some door. And when we read a note in History of Middle-earth, we find out that Tolkien imagined him being attacked from behind and they broke his legs. They didn't break his neck to kill him. They broke his legs so he couldn't escape and he had to starve to death or die of thirst or whatever.
Ugh.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody was still alive then. I think we're talking about the ghosts.
No. Yeah.
Because by this point, Rohan was in its second king, because he's the one who built Medjugorje. It was his dad who built Medjugorje, and then he went in the Paths of the Dead. So I still think that they had enough tangible power that they could have done something, but we didn't see them do it necessarily. Right. As Legolas says, they didn't have to fight. Their mere presence was enough to drive everybody out,
Yeah.
Everybody out of the pool. It was time. The Southerns were gone. The Corsairs of Umbar were gone. And it was time now for the fiefs from the south, from Lebanon and the Harland and Langstrand and all those other places to send.
Now you're just showing off your geography skills of that fictional. I will say, though, as we sort of transition, because Alan, I see your notes, and I think I have to disagree with you on something.
Okay.
We have a bit of an arrival that you think it's Aragorn's arrival that is perhaps the most eucatastrophic moment.
Fine, you might have a different opinion, and I'm gonna tell you on what I'm basing it. Right?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
And it's in On Fairy Stories, the quote that I'm thinking of when he kind of talks about what a eucatastrophe is. I'm going to go ahead and read it because I think it's that important, even though I know we've probably read it on the show 3 or 4 times. He says, "Far more important is the consolation of the happy ending. Almost, I would venture to assert that all complete fairy stories must have it. At least I would say that tragedy is the true form of drama, its highest function. But the opposite is true of fairy story. Since we do not appear to possess a word that expresses this opposite, I will call it eucatastrophe. The eucatastrophic tale is the true form of fairy tale and its highest function." Now, just as a sidebar, the EU prefix is the same prefix that we would also know it as the EV prefix, evangelium, right? So good news. In Greek, it's that same prefix. So it's a good catastrophe. That's the formation of the word.
I'm perhaps showing my hand a little bit too much here, but Alan, are you familiar with the Neon Genesis Evangelion anime?
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same root.
Interesting. I don't think I put that together.
Yeah, the EU and EV prefix are, it's the EU in Greek. Yeah. So Tolkien goes on to say the consolation of fairy stories, the joy of the happy ending, or more correctly, of the good catastrophe, the sudden joyous turn, for there is no true end to any fairy tale. This joy, which is one of the things which fairy stories can produce supremely well, is not essentially escapist nor fugitive. In its fairy tale or otherworld setting, it is a sudden and miraculous grace never to be counted on to recur. It does not deny the existence of discatastrophe, of sorrow and failure, right? Discatastrophe being bad catastrophe. Tolkien says the possibility of these is necessary to the joy of deliverance. It denies, in the face of much evidence, if you will, universal final defeat, and insofar is evangelium. good news, giving a fleeting glimpse of joy beyond the walls of the world, poignant as grief. And here's kind of his definition of like, what does a eucatastrophe look like? It is the mark of a good fairy story of the higher or more complete kind, that however wild its events, however fantastic or terrible the adventures, it can give to child or man that hears it, when the turn comes, a catch of the breath, a beat and lifting of the heart, near to or indeed accompanied by tears, as keen as that given by any form of literary art and having a peculiar quality. And so that's, I think, why for me, I see Aragorn's arrival as like the central eucatastrophe. That's the one that catches my breath and always draws a tear. But tell me, what's the one for you? Is it?
For me, it's the
in
Eagles.
Okay.
Okay, in book 5. Well,
yeah, because the destruction of the ring is a eucatastrophe. I mean, if we're talking about the entire,
Sure. That's expected. I think the Eagles for me, maybe it's because, for me, when I read it, it was Aragorn showing up like, yeah, of course he was gonna. He's the good guy. That's how my brain worked. It never occurred to me that he'd, die off screen or Tolkien would pull any stuff like that. It was expected. The Eagles thing, I think, is so unexpected to me, at least, because it's been hinted at so many times, right? It happened in The Hobbit. It's been mentioned several times throughout.
Gandalf has certainly been transported around by...
Absolutely, yeah. He mentions his ride with Gwai here. But the Eagles are not a taxi service.
No,
Let's keep that in mind. That's why they didn't take the ring to Mordor in the first place, just to...
They're definitely not a courier service.
No,
they are not.
No.
But you're right. The arrival of the Eagles at the end, I think the only reason why I don't count that as a big eucatastrophe in book 5 is because it's still very unsure if it's actually happening, right? We see it from Pippin's perspective, and he's like, oh wait, no, that's not my story, that's Bilbo's story. And then he fades into unconsciousness, and we're left to think that Pippin's dead, just dreaming that the Eagles
for
are
a whole
up.
book, although how, you know what, I don't necessarily know if I was led to think that Pippin was going to die, but I didn't think Tolkien would leave us on such a cliffhanger that there wouldn't be some sort of resolution.
Well, yeah. And because this wasn't like a separate volume. This was just the book 5, book 6 break. So it's still in the same volume.
Right.
But you don't know about Pippin's fate
You don't.
for several chapters. I mean, until you get really pretty far into the field of Cormallin. It's not even at the beginning of the chapter. After Frodo and Sam wake up, they discover they're still alive. Then they discover Gandalf's still alive. It's only later that as they're being served, they see these two people who are much shorter than everybody else. They're like, wait a minute.
Hang on.
That's the first time we find out they're still alive. But yeah, there are so many eucatastrophes in book 5. And of course, we're going to see even more in book 6. But we'll get to the book 6 preview in a minute. What's another one of the themes that we want to talk through a little bit?
Oh, fellowship for sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of that at work. A lot of wonderful individual moments of 2 and 3 characters. Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the Pippin and Baragon relationship.
I love that.
Really, it's not one that I expected because, we don't expect to meet a lot of new characters in book 3 or the final act of a trilogy.
And obviously, there's a reason why he doesn't show up in the films because, again, why introduce new characters? I did love that one. I also loved the friendship that sprouted between Pippin and Baragon's son, Birgil. I thought that was really sweet.
That was really nice. And it's wonderful to show off, I think, both of Pippin's sides, because, of course, there is that maturing side of him. But there's also something very childlike about a Hobbit.
Well, he is the youngest of the 4, for sure. He's barely, kind of an old teenager, really. So, yeah. But, boy, he sure has seen a lot. He has grown so much since he's left the Shire.
Very much so.
I think Baragon is just taken by surprise at the depth of this guy,
I think everybody's taken by surprise with hobbits, and no one more so than, honestly, this father and son duo learning different things about them separately. And then I imagine them just comparing notes. It's like, did you hang out with that guy, the little one?
Perianath? Yeah. Well, what about that incredible fellowship that we saw with, and these are your favorite characters, so of course you notice this, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli through their journeys, right? As they went through the paths of the dead, and, through all the southern fiefdoms of Gondor to Pelargir with the big fight where they didn't really have to do much, and up the Anduin, right, until they got off at the docks there at the Harlan by Minas Tirith. What about that fellowship?
It's my favorite. I mean, I'm a sucker for a really good just camaraderie. I think I looked for that exact sort of friendship in a lot of my media. And also keep in mind, though, it's not just Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli going through this journey. It's also the Grey Company. They're like,
That's
hey,
right.
what if we formed our own fellowship with 23 of us? Yeah, sure.
Something
That
like
sounds awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
Eladon, Elrohir, the 20 Rangers.
Oh, so 25, excuse
25.
me.
Yeah,
25.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty
Fun.
amazing. And then I think of this fellowship that we saw that was really unique. I'm going to say Merry and Durnhelm, even though Durnhelm didn't speak, right? I mean, okay, yes, it was Éowyn, but it was Durnhelm also. I still love that line. In the Durnhelm character, I talk about, Merry sitting on the horse with him because that's Durnhelm. That's not Éowyn. Yeah. And I feel like there was a fellowship between those two characters, even without words. They both knew they were going against the explicit wishes of the king, but they knew they were doing what they felt was the right thing.
Just doing what we're trying to do. It's no more complicated than feeling compelled by duty and a desire to help in that very important way that really only people who are trying to, hide can really do.
Yeah. I just love that it's a fellowship that we saw develop with virtually no words.
And again, this is why I so often am reminded of Tolkien's literary genius. It's like, oh yeah, that's just some guy. He's going to be hanging around and they're just going to be chatting a little bit and then they're done. And now they're bros. But oh, wait a minute. It was actually Éowyn the whole time.
That's amazing stuff.
Which, if we're going to talk about, that family's level of camaraderie and companionship, the Aragorn and Éomer friendship is probably one of my favorite relationships.
Oh, I love it. They've been talking about this for ages. We'll meet again, even though the whole
world's going to end. It's fine.
Yeah.
You and I, we're going to fight. We're probably both going to die. But think how awesome it's going to be.
Yeah.
When we're there and just beating everybody.
And everyone, right? I mean, we get to the end of that chapter and there's that description about how basically Aragorn, Éomer, and Prince Imrahil were untouched. Because they were so masterful at what they did. Every single orc was like, oh, heck no. I'm not trying to take that guy on. Look at his armor. Look at his sword. No.
If you're in a video game and you see the boss, this is the equivalent of the boss
running around.
Yeah. 3 bosses just, wait, I thought this game was supposed to be balanced. No, you're fighting against the pros. They're all here at once. They're all really angry and they're never going to let you forget about it. So
that's right. You have 0 chance. Just run.
Yeah. There's no getting out of this unless you run, and many of them do. And I love that.
I do too. And what about, after the battle, after the Houses of Healing, the fellowship of Merry and Pippin reunited?
Oh.
Wasn't that just one of the most, such a heart-gripping moment? Yes.
It's so important too, because I think obviously Tolkien writes male friendships so well,
he does.
But there is something so important. Even I would say, the opposite of the Frodo-Sam relationship is the Merry-Pippin relationship.
Right. These are very much peers. Yeah.
Yes, they are, it's Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin.
Yeah.
And very rarely do you see all 4 of them together, and I think you see why specifically in this reuniting. It's like, oh, hey, we're also friends, and we are here together now in this terrible place, but we're together, and that's important.
Though by the time they were together, they were actually in a pretty decent place, the Houses of Healing.
Yeah, that's true.
I was thinking of that great conversation they had talking about how, we can't live long on the heights, and
true.
This humility that hobbits have, this inherent humility about, hey, we're not like Aragorn and these guys. And yet, look at what they did. Merry helped kill the Witch King.
It's kind of a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And Pippin at this point has not done the same sort of stuff, right? And the text makes that clear. I hope to be able to equal what you've done. And he even thinks about it like, well, if I killed that troll, then maybe that's an equivalent of collaboratively taking down the Witch King.
Have you ever heard of a false equivalency there, Mr.
Yeah, that might be a stretch.
Mr. Took?
Yeah, but he'll make up for it at the Scouring of the Shire.
He certainly will.
So let's move on and talk about fate and free will. It's not as prevalent with every character here, but there are some really very interesting twists that I want to talk about. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is Denethor, right? He believed, absolutely convinced through the Palantir, that defeat was fated, right? So he saw no way out.
Right.
This goes back to Gandalf at the Council of Elrond saying that despair is for those who see the end beyond all doubt. Denethor was convinced that he did exactly that. He was wrong, which is why we should always have doubt, even if we think we see the end. But he believed that defeat was fated, and therefore he exercised his free will. So he saw what he thought was fate, decided to do something about it, and what he did, of course, was the most damaging and destructive thing that you could do. Instead of going out and fighting for your city and dying in battle, he took his own life and tried to kill his son at the same time.
I hesitate to draw this comparison because obviously it's a very different scenario.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the first thing that came to mind was if you were in a sports game and your team was rallying in the bottom of the, if this is a baseball game and you're rallying in the bottom of the ninth, or there's a minute left in whatever, game you have to score a point in, punching the mascot in the face is usually not the best way to have. If the general manager comes out and is like, I've had enough of you, Baltimore Oriole, and just socks him. I'm sorry to any
Orioles, but okay.
It was the first thing that came to mind. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
It's the
So who's the Denethor in this analogy? The head coach of the losing team?
Yeah, the head coach of the team that's like, oh man, maybe we have a chance, and the losing team's coach is just like, no, I think I'm gonna just maybe go punch our own mascot. Yeah. Not that Faramir is, mascot, but he is the symbol.
He's the next steward, and so he's literally leaving the city with no leadership whatsoever. He's taking out himself as the active steward. Boromir's already dead. He's going to kill Faramir. So now, even if the city were to be victorious, there's no more House of the Stewards. This is where being convinced that something is fate when it is not
so important
can lead to very, very poor decision when it comes to exercising free will. But he did have the choice to do what he did. And
he did.
Yeah.
Éowyn also comes to mind.
Oh, interesting.
In that she's refusing that fate of stay at home,
right?
Keep an eye on the kingdom while we're gone.
You have permission to burn in the house when we lose. Yeah.
Oh, what a line!
Gosh, that was
what
a
line,
one, right?
Yeah. But yeah, Éowyn's sort of, all right, fate, try me. I'm not doing this. Tough.
No. Wow. Yeah, that's a very good point. She really does exercise her free will in a way that is, at least in the eyes of Theoden and even in Aragorn's eyes at the time where he's trying to explain what she should do, she's quote unquote disobeying. And thank God she did, because what she did plays a huge role then in fulfilling prophecy, which is really another word for fate, when it comes to the slaying of the Witch King on the Pelennor. Without her being there, he doesn't go down. Not permanently. I mean, Mary maybe... Well, no, Mary would never have gotten that close to him. That's the whole point.
No, I don't think Mary gets even remotely close.
The Sword of Westernesse certainly did have the dagger, right? Basically got rid of the spell that knit sinew to sinew. That's what the text tells us. And that's what then enabled Éowyn to strike that killing blow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, without her presence there, the Witch King is victorious on that battlefield.
And then, obviously we're sort of missing the biggest culprit. Mary is also there, tempting, or rather refusing, I should say.
That's true.
Fate.
Doing the exact same thing that Éowyn did. I'm not going to listen to you, King. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we're done here. We're not doing that anymore.
I love that. I think also the Paths of the Dead are another one of these great moments, right? I mean, we talk about fate kind of being tied in with prophecy, right? I mean, at some point, this is going to happen. At some point, Isildur's heir is going to go through the Paths of the Dead, call the men of the mountains to honor their oath and do something about it. Aragorn's like, well, I sure hope that prophecy is about me. So he exercises his free will to do it.
Oh God, what if it's not?
What if
I'm wrong? Oh goodness.
So you could make the argument that Aragorn was fated, but the free will, even if you don't buy that Aragorn exercised his free will to go, and I do, I believe that he did. I believe he's like, I may be wrong. Like, I'm going to do this, because if I don't, there's no other way that Minas Tirith is going to survive. So even if I do this and I die, too bad. So he exercises his free will for sure. But even if we argue that he was fated to do this, the others went with free will.
Yeah, which is arguably
Legolas,
more
Gimli,
important.
Elladan, Elrohir, and all of the Rangers and their horses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is just astounding. Yeah, absolutely. Man, that... Fate and free will, I don't know that we talked about it much during the season. I hope that this time around I'm a little more observant of those themes as we walk through. So I'll be taking closer notes this time. Big one. Big theme. This is something that we see throughout all of the Legendarium and so many moments on both. They really came to a peak in book 5. Certainly the despair moments did. And that is the hope and despair dichotomy. Again, kind of circling back to the On Fairy Stories Beowulf, but not quite, because despair is a personal choice, right? We talk about hope being plus 10 on the scale. So you can be hopeless at 0, but despair is negative 10. So it's a full spectrum. So you can be without hope and be at 0. And Aragorn is sometimes hopeless, but he never despairs. And so it's when you get to the negative side of that scale that you run into trouble. Let's talk real quickly at the beginning of book 5. There was certainly a lot of hope in the people of Minas Tirith as they saw the armies coming from those southern fiefdoms, but wow, despair that there wasn't going to be enough. I mean, what did Beargill say? That it was a tenth of what they'd expected? A tithe of their strength or something along those lines is what he said.
Something to indicate that the strength was not nearly what they really wanted.
I literally think he used the word tithe. So yeah, we're talking about a tenth. And that is, of course, because the Corsairs of Umbar were raiding the coasts, and all those places needed to keep their people there in order to defend their homes. So, yeah.
And lo and behold, here they are, and just, oh God, you're here, but is it going to be enough? And it's one of those things of so many different types of despair, where Eowyn's despair is, oh God, you're not here anymore. Aragorn, you're going away. Polar opposite.
Oh, that really did drive her to despair, didn't it?
Yeah, I was also here for that portion of the book.
That's right.
Where you explained the difference between thee and thou, and I was like, hang on. Is this romantic parts of speech? Get out of here.
Yeah, that was pretty cool figuring that out, kind of diving deeper into that use of what we now see as formal, but what is actually informal and intimate. The thee and thou and thy. And Aragorn keeping her at arm's length and saying, sorry, lady, man, heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah, it's just not real. It's like, it's so sad. It's so sad, but also it drives people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't have done had Aragorn been like...
And in this case, it's good, right? I mean, because Eowyn decides to go as Durnhelm, takes Merry with him, and ends up slaying the Witch King. Fantastic. I think there was some serious despair going on in the people of Minas Tirith. We see it in Baragon and others, that the Rohirrim would not arrive in time. They basically thought they're going to show up in time to basically kick the orcs out, having a party in the guard towers at the top of the citadel.
No, that's not how this goes at all.
No.
In fact, I would argue it goes the exact opposite.
Yes, it does.
It's so masterfully done by Tolkien. He sprinkles it in, right? It's not a long drawn out conversation between, well, I mean, partially it is, but it's not so heavy handed that it's on the nose. But
no,
sprinkled in here and there is Baragon and Burgill wondering, and then people on the left and the right of Pippin and Gandalf saying, oh, I really hope they show up. And it's like, oh, that consistent hint over and over and over again.
And yet, because of Gandalf, they do. I mean, if they had waited for the Red Arrow to arrive, it would have been too late.
Yes.
Because keep in mind, folks who are listening to this, if you're remembering the movies, because the Beacons of Minas Tirith are a fantastic sequence in the films, the score reaches its absolute zenith at that moment. It is the most amazing score. It is the beautiful cinematography, great scene. Beacons had nothing to do with actually alerting Rohan. The Beacons were there to let the rest of Gondor know what was going on. The Red Arrow was sent to Theoden to say, hey, can you come help us? That did get there. But arguably, if it got there when it did, and Theoden said, all right, let's get our forces together, then they would have only arrived in time to dislodge the orcs from their party in the Citadel. But because Gandalf knew, and Gandalf said, go, get your guys together, get these forces going, get them going as quickly as you can. You can't wait for everybody.
Yeah.
That's the exact reason why they were able to show up in time, which is why when that cock crows, as Gandalf is facing off against the Witch King, it is his 3D chess, really, that has come into play, and the winning move has just been made, and the Witch King is just like, what now?
I'm sorry. Say that one more time. The who? The what? I mean, I expected maybe a little bit, but please, Gandalf, this is too much.
Yeah.
This is too much.
Yeah. And it's all because Gandalf was able to pull it off without him having to be involved in the fight directly.
Yeah. I'm also reminded of, if we're talking about hope and despair, the kind of dichotomy of both Denethor and Baragon in the, I will almost call this not necessarily even a hope for Minas Tirith, but almost a hope for Faramir.
Oh yeah, it was very, very personal for Baragon, right?
Yeah, it's very personal for Baragon. It's also very personal, obviously, because it's his son. But Denethor has the same outlook on the world that he has on Faramir, right? Everything is death and destruction. Whereas Baragon is like, well, there might still be hope.
Yeah,
we can see.
We need to keep Faramir alive against that hope, right?
Yeah, 100%. Because if he's gone, then what else do we have?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because we see throughout how the people of Minas Tirith view Faramir. They view him much, much more highly than Denethor does.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And in fairness, book Denethor does value his son a lot more than film Denethor did.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Even book Denethor is not winning any Father of the Year awards. Let's put it that way.
No.
But yeah, the despair that Denethor has, not only because he believes they're lost to be a certain thing, but now he sees his son struggling with the Black Breath, and he's given up total hope. And Baragon has gone so far as to have to shed blood in order to try to save Faramir. It is something he regrets, and something he is not regrets. It's something that he's sad he had to do.
Yeah.
He expresses this exactly like, man, I wish it didn't come to that. In some of the draft stuff, I love the way Gandalf handled it. He basically was trying to explain to the guards, two of whom Baragon slew.
Yeah.
That look, Baragon's loyalty is to Faramir, right? Faramir is his lord. Your loyalty was to Denethor, so you had to do what he said, even if what he said was crazy. So you were both just following orders. Now it's done. You guys need to be at peace.
I feel like, though, and this again, this my World War I hyperfixation is showing.
I understand. Yeah. At some point, an order becomes something that you just cannot follow.
Yeah. An order is only so far as the person's moral compass, right? If the order is bad enough, there's a certain level that most people won't cross.
You'd think even the guards of the Citadel would have resisted an order that said, start killing the civilians in the city.
Yeah.
Better that they die by your sword than by the orcs, you know.
Again, reminded of Denethor versus Theoden, as they have such a dichotomy. Huge comparison point in that moment. But yeah, I don't know. The just following orders thing has never sat well with me.
I know. And that didn't make it into the final text. It was just an interesting way for him to try to keep the peace between these guys so that they didn't then try to respond by killing Baragon.
Thank you.
And also that they wouldn't feel absolutely terrible for what they did, though arguably, like you suggest, maybe they should have. I mean, I suppose the king could have ordered his own death, and they would be obligated to do that. But yeah, killing Faramir might be a step too far.
It's almost a certain level of like, all right, how much despair did you feel in that moment? Because you got to do something pretty extreme to be like, yes, in fact, I will follow this ridiculous order.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, maybe they just kept hoping at some point it won't happen, but the fact is they drew swords on Baragon, so
yeah. So they're gone now.
What about the minuscule diminishing hope, the very last hope, really, and frankly, the almost total despair, certainly the hopelessness, even if not despair, of the army marching on the Black Gate. And it did actually become despair the closer they got, right? As the Nazgul are flying overhead and they know what's coming. Man.
That's so rough, because I think we've all dealt with despair, but the idea of all hope is lost, especially when you're reading a book where not a lot of people have died, but if you've come this far, you can't help but think in the back of your mind, Tolkien wouldn't kill everybody.
Well, he made us think Gandalf was dead for a while.
Yeah, exactly. He did kill Boromir. He faked us out. Like, I often wonder, as I so often do, how different the Lord of the Rings would be if it came out today, and how much speculation there would be online about who's gonna die and what people think would happen, because it's not often now in 2023 when we're recording this that everybody lives.
Oh yeah, it's a rare book where that happens, right?
Yeah,
or
it is.
Movie or TV show for that matter. Any other hope and despair moments you can think of?
Oh man, covered the big ones.
Yeah.
When I think about book 5, I often think about the little things, the little sentences of the people in Minas Tirith that Pippin overhears, or that Pippin and Gandalf see as like, yeah, things are bad. We're not feeling so great. And that keeps happening over and over and over again until there's
just
not
keeps
even
dripping.
much. Yeah, exactly. It's this slow drip of despair that accumulates that you don't even realize is like you're holding your breath the whole time. And it's like, oh yeah, no, this is.
Oh, and we're going to get a great moment when that finally releases in The Steward of the King, when Faramir and Eowyn are up there looking out over all that. And it finally, yes, I cannot wait. That's a moment of hope. I was thinking of just a couple other things. The despair that Pippin has, he cries aloud when he sees the mouth of Sauron hold up Frodo's mithril.
Another great scene.
He is certain now that his friend is dead. And then, but sticking with Pippin, and something we just talked about in the previous section of themes, was that fading hope that he had when the eagles were arriving. Oh, the eagles are coming? Oh, wait, never mind. That's Bilbo's story. That's not mine. And we sort of experience this moment with him in sort of an almost out-of-body experience as he looks down on himself, like, okay, it's all over. And
doesn't he say goodbye at one point?
Yeah. I think he does. He certainly, it is very clear that he thinks he's going to die. We see essentially this conversation between himself and his disappearing spirit, right? Yeah. So it ends as I guessed it would, his thought said, even as it fluttered away, and it laughed a little within him ere it fled. Almost gay it seemed to be casting off at last all doubt and care and fear. And then even as it, talking about his thought, right, his consciousness, winged away into forgetfulness, it heard voices, and they seemed to be crying in some forgotten world far above, the eagles are coming. For one moment more, Pippin's thought hovered. Bilbo, it said. But no, that came in his tale long, long ago. This is my tale, and it's ended now. Goodbye. And his thoughts fled far away, and his eyes saw no more. Just like, Pip. Pip. So there's this like last moment of hope. Nope, that's not me. Just intense.
I forgot how intense that was. I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you read it.
I remember doing that at the end of last season, going, wow, this is harder than I thought it was. I'm almost crying because Pippin's dead. I mean, even though I know he's not.
Yeah, but you can't. Sometimes you can't help but be caught up in the, let's go on this story, this adventure one more time, and let's feel everything that the author wants us to feel. And there's something very liberating.
Well, here's the funny thing about the fact that it took us so long to recap all those themes in book 5. I loved it, by the way. I'm glad we did. We have almost no time to actually preview book 6. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at each of those themes, and we're going to name one moment each that we're looking forward to for those themes. What's the moment you're looking forward to that will illustrate fellowship, the fellowship theme the most?
It seems like such a cop-out, but it's the I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you scene with Sam and Frodo.
I'm going to say the Scouring of the Shire. I'm going to go kind of the unexpected direction and say the way the hobbits come together in the Scouring of the Shire really speaks to me.
That's a solid alternative. If you're going to pick any alternative, I'll let you have that one.
Fair enough. Lots and lots and lots of the ring at work in book 6, of course. Right until there's no more ring. But so what's your favorite? What's the moment of the ring at work that you're looking forward to in book 6?
Oh boy, almost the opposite of the ring at work, and that is Samwise Gamgee and the temptation of the ring. Where
dang it, you took my answer. Yeah, Samwise the Strong.
It's such a good moment.
The moment where he imagines the plain of Gorgoroth turning into a garden.
Yeah,
and then he's like, nah, never mind. I love that moment.
I don't want it. That's not for me. Thank you, though. I appreciate the offer.
I just need my own hands to do my own garden. I don't need a garden swollen to the size of a realm.
It's fine.
That's great stuff.
Oh, what a great quote. Thank you for pulling that out.
Oh, absolutely love that. And I can't wait. We're going to do that. I think that might be even in the very first episode in the Tower of Carethungle, but if not, it'll be the second one, I think. So we're going to be covering that pretty soon. On fairy stories or Beowulf. So you can go either way here. You can either go with a catastrophe moment, or you can go with that circle of light moment, certain defeat sort of thing.
Okay, I'm going to seem like a Lord of the Rings newbie right now. Faramir and Eowyn talking together.
That's a recovery moment, isn't it?
That's a recovery moment. Okay.
That really is. No, that works. That's on fairy stories, right? That's part of recovery, escape, consolation are the 3 parts of fairy stories that we really want to, address there.
I think I almost want to go both in that same scene where Faramir is the hope and Eowyn is the despair. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're talking about hope and despair, but we're talking about on fairy stories and Beowulf. But that's okay. I still see, as you were talking about, you're viewing it through the lens of recovery and maybe a little bit of escape too, right? I mean,
yes.
She's getting out of that role. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
She's like, I don't have to do this thing anymore. And now that I don't have to, I actually want to be a healer. Like I don't want to be a warrior anymore.
Yeah.
That's going to be so interesting to talk about. Now that she doesn't have to do that anymore, she actually chooses to do something else with her life, which fits really with Faramir, who only sees the value of war for what it defends, right? He doesn't love the sword for its sharpness and that kind of thing. He loves that.
Another amazing quote.
My favorite quote in the entire Legendarium is that whole bit that he explains to Frodo. For me, oh man,
there's so many in
there
book
really
6.
are so many. I'm going to say the moment on the field of Cormallen. It's such a mini, tiny little catastrophe, and it's more of a moment of recovery when Frodo and Sam see that Gandalf is still alive. And poor Sam is reminded that that doesn't mean everything's going to get fixed, because remember he says, "Is everything sad going to come undone?" And your heart breaks for poor naive Sam. No, it's not. But Gandalf is still alive, and that's a good thing. All right, what is the moment in book 6 that you think illustrates that wonderful dichotomy between fate and free will?
Oh, God.
I think it really is the destruction of the ring. I think this is the moment, because Frodo chooses with his free will, but also under the influence of the ring. So you can argue that it's not fully free will. This is sort of like Turin sometimes under the curse of Glaurung. How much of it is free will? How much of it is the curse? In this case, how much of it is the power of the ring? Tolkien himself tells us in the letters, nobody could have done this, but also nobody would have gotten as far as Frodo did. Anybody stronger would have been tempted sooner and taken the ring. Anybody weaker wouldn't have even gotten that far. Frodo got as far as anybody could have possibly gotten. He failed, yes, but nobody would have succeeded. But the fact that the ring then got destroyed through fate, through the hand of Iluvatar intervening in a million ways to make sure that Gollum is still alive and there to do what he did. So that's going to be the fate and free will moment for me.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. I don't think I fully appreciated that for what it was.
It is such an intense moment, and I cannot wait to explore that. I think that's the set of chapters that I'm going to be working with the Nerd of the Rings on. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Lovely.
Yeah,
lovely.
Matt will be with me for Mount Doom. Yeah. So what about you? Another fate and free will moment before we try to wrap up here.
I'm trying to think of one that is not the destruction of the ring. I was going to say Aragorn choosing not to come into Minas Tirith until Sauron is destroyed, but of course that's book 5. So I think Samwise Gamgee wondering if the ring could, or wondering if the Shire rather could ever be returned to its former glory, and then being instrumental in its recovery.
Yeah,
I think there's no better
the gift
example
of Galadriel. Yeah,
exactly.
That is a great moment, because you're right. He's very despairing that the Shire is never going to be back to what it was.
Yeah,
and then he gets to be a part of bringing hope and restoration. Sort of another On Fairy Stories moment too, because that's definitely recovery for sure.
For sure.
Hope and despair. I may come back to the moment that you used earlier, the whole, Sam, Frodo despairing, really, I can't do this anymore. I can't take it even a step further. And Sam doing the work. Sam's still holding on to hope. And I think that is one of my favorite moments. Boy, I'm so excited to get into book 6. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. But we are going to be waiting a little bit, because folks, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. But join us again in 2 weeks. Remember, we're still doing that every other week thing. I needed to take some time at the beginning of this season. But in 2 weeks, we'll visit the Tower of Cirith Ungol, lovely place. And that's when we'll return to a weekly schedule after that.
Yes, it's a regular vacation home in the tropics.
This is not the Airbnb I signed up for, man. This place is terrible.
Yeah, hi, can I get a refund, please?
Seriously.
There are spiders and orcs everywhere.
It's infested.
Before we wrap up, though, Alan and I always want to thank the members of Team PPP, editor Jordan Rannells, Barleyman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Cullen, and website guru Phil Dean.
And please take a minute to check out theprancingponypodcast.com. That's where you'll find show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, our online storefront where you can get PPP merch of all kinds, including the all-new chapter art that Megan started doing in book 5 and will be doing again this season.
All right. You'll also want to visit the library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is a podcast about a book. Go
or
figure.
A few books for that matter, yeah.
Yeah. If Tolkien had his way, it would have been 6. So if you're interested in any of the books that we've mentioned in this show, you can find a link for it in our library. We do get a small amount of compensation when you make a purchase, and we do thank you for that.
Though actually, if he got in his way, it would have been 1. That was the problem. They were like, no, we got to do it in 3 volumes. He's like, yeah, but there's 6 books that make up one story. Can we do it in 1? No. Can we do it and publish the Silmarillion at the same time? Heck no.
No.
That is such a fun story. If you're really interested in that whole tale, go watch today's Tolkien Times, because in the first 2 series, so like the first 16 weeks, I cover that whole drama of getting the Lord of the Rings published. But it's the first 8 that really cover that part. You'll really enjoy those. They're short episodes. You'll enjoy them. We also want to thank our patrons at the Caradan's contribution tier. I want to start with the May in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Ned from Connecticut, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, and Karen in the UK.
There's also Zach Sue in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Erica in Texas, Carson in Oklahoma, Keith in Alabama, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen in Massachusetts, Christiana from Ohio, and John from Japan. Thank you all very much for the support.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony podcast. Subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, the Book 6 themes and moments you're most looking forward to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com. And if you want your voice literally heard, well, send us audio of your question by visiting podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us.
Hi there, Alan. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
I'm just going to turn that into a text question. I mean, come on. Got standards on this show, Don.
Oh, touche. Folks, please be sure to still email the questions, though, however ridiculous they may be, to Barleyman. Even though Barleyman's been a lot more reliable lately, there's still a lot of mail to get through. We will try to get to your question just as soon as we are able.
Indeed, we will. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
have a great rest of your hope and despair through the rest of your life, and may many catastrophes come upon the way through the bad times. How do you like that? I'm staying on brand, Alan.
I love it.